Welcome everybody, this is Luna calling. Luna, that is, Light, Underground, Nebulous Archives. Luna is calling out to all those lovers of abandoned buildings and flecks of dust in beams of sunlight. I'm Ol.
And I'm Val.
And I'd just like to say, Val, that I was making my way to work today.
Again, you're always on your way to work, don't you? Aren't you? Don't you have any time off?
I was rowing my way up the Seine in my rubber dinghy.
How'd you get the permit from the Mary to do that?
I'm very inventive. I just decided to take a leaf out of one of our listeners' books, Jeff Boucher, great rower. And so I was rowing up the Seine, and I have to tell you, I was quite shocked. The Seine is overflowing its banks.
What, again?
It's not just overflowing its banks. There's flotsam, there's jetsam swirling and tumbling about. And I don't mind a bit of flotsam.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a bit of flotsam.
No.
But there's jetsam. Who's throwing it in there all the time?
Well, I thought, the flotsam belongs to the ecosystem of what's going on there. It's part of the marine life. But the jetsam.
Oh, no, the jetsam's a real problem. You see, we hear a lot at the moment. Val and I, we'd like to think of ourselves as being in the public sphere.
Somewhat.
Yeah, parts of
Reluctant.
us, our minds are in the public sphere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Yeah. And we're hearing a lot of noise about immigrants coming for our jobs, immigrants out, that kind of thing.
Oh, particularly with the upcoming municipal elections in Paris, that's a lot of rhetoric that we're hearing from, the National Front and even some parts of the centre.
That's right. And I'd just like to say right now, I want to put it out on the table, Val, I am an immigrant.
No. You're trying to tell me you are not French?
I'm not French. I never was French. I might become French.
How does one become? I thought being French was an innate state of being. Was an innate, quality that I possess.
I am in search of my inner Frenchness, and I have to say that my grandfather, when he followed up his maternal family tree, claimed to have found some Frenchness in the family somewhere in Normandy, right? And we know that most of the British, well, half the British come from the French anyway, the Normans, back in 1066. But I have to say, I am an immigrant 3 times over, because first of all, I come from a nation of immigrants, England, which is one unholy mashup of different races, Picts, Angles, Saxons, Normans, what have you. They're all there. Bit of Viking in there.
Bit of a mishmash, yep.
Yeah, I've got red in my beard. That's Viking for you right there.
Yeah.
Then, second time I was an immigrant, we went to Australia. So I'm a proud paper Aussie. Thanks very much.
What is this term, a paper Aussie?
Well, all Aussies are paper Aussies, mate. But some of them think just because they're born in this confiscated country, they can call themselves real Aussies. Paper Aussies are ones who actually swore to actually join the nation and have got a citizenship certificate.
Yes. They were the one that put in they weren't just sitting on their birthright, alleged birthright. They put in the effort to try and join the nation state of so-called Australia.
Do you know who I swore an oath to become a paper Aussie back in 1989?
I bet it was the bloody Queen.
It was Elizabeth Windsor herself,
yeah.
Slightly paradoxical coming from England myself. And then a third time immigrant because I decided to make France my home.
Yeah. But again, I suppose it's this interesting claim towards, what is, a national identity. There's this kind of this mythologizing about, if I just go back far enough into my family tree, I can find some French, but is that really an adequate cause of identity? Is that what makes a French person, French?
Well, this is going to be very interesting for us today, Val, looking at Meditation 3, because it's all about origins. It's all about where do these ideas come from, these ideas I find in my mind.
Yeah, and what relationship these ideas have with the external world, what objective reality, are they trying to refer to?
Is there something pure and good that we can find at the source, or is it just a mess?
Something that can be called into doubt.
Well, precisely. Yeah. So today, again, when I was rowing in my dinghy up the Seine, I felt in a poetic mood. And for our poetry corner today, it's actually Val who's gonna read out a bit of poetry here.
Yeah, I thought that'd be a nice way to keep up the habit of the habit established in the previous episode. So I'm going to be reading an abridged version of The Idea of Order at Key West by Wallace Stevens. She sang beyond the genius of the sea. The water never formed to mind or voice, like a body, holy body, fluttering, its empty sleeves, and yet its mimic motion made constant cry, caused constantly a cry, that was not ours, although we understood, inhuman of the veritable ocean. The sea was not a mask, no more was she. The song and water were not medleyed sound, even if what she sang was what she heard, since what she sang was uttered word by word. It may be that in all her phrases stirred the grinding water and the gasping wind, but it was she and not the sea we heard. It was her voice that made the sky acutest at its vanishing. She measured to the hour its solitude. She was the single artificer of the world in which she sang. And when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self. That was her song, for she was the maker. Then we, as we beheld her striding there alone, knew that there never was a world for her except the one she sang and singing made.
Well, thank you, Val, and thank you, Wallace Stevens.
What a beautiful. I feel like this is really going to set the tone for what we're going to be trying to or interrogate, meditate upon in this episode.
Absolutely, because and I think we're going to do a bit of a recap here to work out just where we've arrived at. It is going to be a question of the relationship between the self and the world in Meditation 3.
Yeah.
And how do we get there? Well, let's just go back to poor Rene, comes out of school. He's finished his fantastic education.
Yeah, at the most elite college, or one of the most elite colleges in Europe.
Good Jesuit college. And then he realizes that everything that he's learnt is contradictory and more or less useless.
It's absolutely incoherent. Contradictions abounding. There's no unified kind of thought behind it, right?
Exactly. I mean, he basically says in the Discourse on Method, this stuff, it's going to get me by in society, right? I'll be able to discourse nicely in salons about morals and talk about myths from the ancient Greeks, that kind of thing. But can I actually solve any problems? Do I know what's happening in the physical world? Can I actually orientate myself? No, I can't.
No, I don't really have any practical knowledge whatsoever.
So here we are. This is the first step in our recap. The sciences are a complete mess. And let me just say one thing for philosophers is they are not happy when there's a mess.
No, absolutely. It's not very clear. It's not very distinct. So what are they going to do about it?
They're going to tidy it up, Val. That's what we do as philosophers.
Yeah. I feel like that's perhaps not the common conception of what philosophers do. I thought, the kind of image that I'm often communicated is that we make more of a mess, if anything.
Oh, no. That's maybe we shift the mess around a bit, but there's a bit of tidying that occurs. So, second step in our recap, what does he do? He says, well, the universe is just one thing, right? And if we are going to have scientific knowledge of the universe, then that science has to be unified as well. You can't just have some biologist going off one way and classifying animals. You can't just have some chemist who's wrestling his way out of alchemy in the 17th century, coming up with 5 different elements, and some of them are choleric and some of them have to do with fire and some of them are passive and have to do with the ground. You can't have him off in his corner and then somebody else trying to work out the trajectory of cannonballs in the other corner. They've all got to come together. He's basically saying to everybody, come to the party. Let's all join together. It's like that Beatles song, Come Together.
Come together. And this is, I suppose, all of this, I suppose, in at least young Rene's mind, is the fault of Aristotle, right? It's Aristotle who categorizes all the sciences into these different kind of disciplines, right? And then, the university system just took that and ran with it,
Well, the problem is that Aristotle divided the entire universe up into that region which was reigned by necessity and mathematical laws, which was above the moon, right? So the stars in this, geocentric universe, the stars always return to the same place.
Yeah.
And then there's the sublunar world below the moon, which is ruled by contingency and chance, and one can only ever come up with a relatively vague account of what's going on, an approximate account of what's going on in the sublunar world.
Sublunar, does that mean that's beneath this podcast, or?
It's beneath par. It's definitely beneath par.
But isn't this exactly so? So Aristotle divides the world in a particular way, but then Descartes' going to divide the world in a different way. But his hope is not towards this kind of continual division. He's going to try and find this common ground between or what he sees as seemingly disparate, which I feel is a pretty important gesture perhaps to remind ourselves of, particularly in the modern world in which we live, where there's a tendency towards just hyper specialization. I suppose there's been a movement in universities towards being interdisciplinary, but we forget that well, maybe not in Descartes' time, but interdisciplinary was just the kind of name of the game. You weren't just formed in one specialization.
Well, Descartes went beyond these interdisciplinary blokes because he actually joined together two disciplines. He unified algebra and geometry.
Yes.
So what he was saying was, look, all of you come together to the party. I've already got algebra and geometry to talk together because now we've got Cartesian coordinates. We've got the x-axis, we've got the y-axis, right? So we can draw curves, right? So he says, come together, let's unify science. And then he says, and this is step 3 in our recap, he says, this unified science, it has to be founded, right? We have to find the foundation of science in one piece of certain knowledge.
The Archimedean point that he is searching for, in which he thinks that he will be able to lift up the unified world with.
Absolutely. And many philosophers in the 17th and the 18th century, even if they had a beef with Descartes, they were so influenced by this because they all looked for a foundation to knowledge. So Locke and Hume, they're going to go and try and find a foundation for knowledge in sense perception, for example.
They're going to go against Descartes and go back to sense perception and think perhaps maybe our Rene was mistaken in some of the steps in which he took.
Yeah, but they certainly agreed with this step. And he believed, Val, that science could be unified and it had to be founded because it took place, just like geometry, as a series of deductive steps. So if you've got your foundation, you can then, it's basically like, I like to think of this as, those babushka dolls. No, they're Matryoshka dolls.
Matryoshka dolls, yes, common misconception.
The Russian Matryoshka dolls. So basically, it's a reverse Matryoshka doll because he's starting off with the indubitable, tiny piece of certain knowledge that's the tiniest Matryoshka doll.
The smallest one, and then
he's going to pull larger dolls out of the smallest one. And he's going to it's like an inverse pyramid, if you want to think of it that way.
Oh, okay. So he's not closing off the universe, because in my mind, when you use this example, I thought he was going to start with the smallest Matryoshka doll, and then he's going to put a bigger one on top of it, and then another bigger one on top of it. But he's doing it
he's
in
a
the
midwife. He's a midwife, just like Socrates. He's going to pull the bigger Matryoshka doll out of the smaller one because he's going to show that there are deductive links. He's going to deduce the next step in his building of science out of the cogito, out of his knowledge of his existence.
So the smallest possible unit is the cogito, the thinking thing.
And that's the fourth and final moment in our recap, Val, because this is the other odd thing that he does. Now that he's said that science has to be unified, science can be founded on something certain, he then says, where am I going to find that certain thing? I'm going to find it in my own ego.
I'm going to find it within. The truth was inside me all along.
That's what's so strange, because he was talking about science, which has got something to do with the universe, right? So you think he'd start with something about the universe, but no, he actually goes to the self.
Yeah, he's done something incredibly counterintuitive, right? Particularly when we think about the sciences. What do we hear all the time? The sciences have, they're the ones that speak the objective truth about the reality of the world, how it functions. Sciences, in their objectivity, name the laws of the world. But he's done the inverse. He says, no, to found these in the first place, we have to have something of the self there. What is the self that is practicing these sciences?
So this takes us to the beginning of the third meditation. If you remember, Val, there he is. He's doubting the existence of the world, but he's got this one bit of certainty, which is that he is a thinking thing. He knows what he is. He's a thinking thing, right?
Thinking thing, yes.
And what he actually does here is he says, well, I'm certain that I exist, right? But I used to be certain of all kinds of things. Yeah. And being certain of things is not enough. That's not a good criterion of truth, because you have all kinds of religious bigots. You have all kinds of dogmatists, left, right, and centre. All of them are certain of their beliefs.
Yeah. Certainly, and beliefs that perhaps have never been called into doubt, as Rene is trying to do here, right? There are plenty of things that I thought I was absolutely certain about, only to find out that I was absolutely just mistaken.
So he's going to introduce something very famous, which is his second criterion of truth. So not only do you need to have absolute certainty, but you have certainty because he says, whatever I perceive very clearly and distinctly is true.
This criterion of clear and distinct has been I suppose, a subject of a lot of debate about, well, what is this clear and distinctness, I suppose, amongst, Cartesian scholars, and I suppose for everything. What is a clear and distinct idea? I think we have tried to interrogate this a few times, and often I find that every time I try and interrogate my ideas, they're all confused and muddled.
Well, I have to say it's extremely useful, this criterion. I use this every day when I pick my kids up from school, right? Now, how do I know which child to pick up, right?
They all look the same, don't they?
They all look the same. They make the same kind
Yeah.
of noise. They're
Yeah.
about the same size,
That-
more or less.
yeah.
So what I need is I need to be able to distinguish my child from the
Yeah.
other children, right?
Yeah. You need to be able to distinguish between your ideas and the objects themselves, right?
Yeah, so my child is the one who's missing his water bottle.
Yeah.
He's forgotten his jacket.
Yeah.
He's blonde and he's got spiky hair.
Hasn't done his homework.
No homework. Well, what's homework? What is homework, Val?
I don't know. It's extra work that they make you do once you've left the place of work.
So let's say that I've distinguished my child correctly
Yep.
by the bits that are missing from him,
Yep.
right? The water bottle's missing,
Yep.
jacket's missing, homework's missing,
Yeah.
memory's missing, right? He hasn't drunk anything. He's
Yeah.
dehydrated.
This is so you're really reducing the qualities, right?
He's happy though because he's beat everybody else at table soccer or football, as they call it
Football, yes.
on the continent.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's almost doing a kind of invert. Well, I suppose he's inverting Blaise Pascal, right? Where only ever the list of qualities. Here you are being like, I need to find the most minimal unit of that is my child. By stripping away all the qualities that they don't have.
Yeah, but this makes me sound like quite an inhuman parent. Val.
well,
So
I
let me add. There's a second criterion, thanks to Descartes,
Woo.
which is clarity.
Yeah.
I must have a clear idea of my son,
Yes.
which is that I must be able to clearly list all of his positive attributes.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is a question that Descartes himself, poses of his own origins and his own existence, right? He goes, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I have some parents, and then those parents have parents, but is that really who I am?"
Well, I think that just as when I'm picking out a particular child as my child
Yeah.
from the pickup after school. Not only do I distinguish my child from other children, but I also know what's specific about my child. Well, Descartes' doing the same thing here because yet again, meditation 3, what is he doing? He's doing a triage of his ideas.
Yeah.
He's going through all these things that are occurring in his mind. And he says, look, I am no longer going to doubt that I have ideas. There
Yeah.
are these ideas occurring in my mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is where he starts building up, right? Because one of the things I think that is a very common or very easy mistake to make with Descartes, particularly if you're reading him for the first time, is thinking that his conclusion, I think, therefore I am, or I am a thinking thing, is the end of the trajectory, right? He's found the most minimal unit. He's going to have to start building these things up, but he's going to start building this thing up from the register, of, exactly as you said, Ol, of thoughts. What are the thoughts that I have? And how can I work out which ones are true, which ones are clear and distinct, which ones are false, which ones lead me astray? So yeah, he's going to be doing this triage of all of the thoughts that we have to start building up to this point of what can we know, but what can we know via the fact that I am a thinking thing?
Absolutely, and he says, he returns to this critique of the imagination and a critique of habit, which he developed in Meditation 2. He says, it used to be the case before I practiced these philosophical meditations that I believed there were things outside of me which were the sources of my ideas and which resembled them in all respects.
Yeah. And I mean, this critique of habitual belief is, again, he's going against Aristotle's empiricism. We often have, even in the example that you use, if we relied exclusively on habit, say you've gone, you go to the same school more or less at the same time of day, you have your habits of picking out things in the world, but sometimes, you may make mistakes in your ideas, right? You may accidentally, maybe out of habit, pick up the wrong child or leave one behind.
Look, I must say, in my defence, that has never happened. It
Yeah.
happened to a couple of grandparents, which we're aware of.
Yes.
But it with a kid in a creche, right?
Oh
But
dear.
they got the wrong baby,
Yeah.
right? But that never happened to us,
Yeah.
right? Now he's going to say that he's going to go back over his doubt and say, look, I used to have this habitual certain belief about these things out there in the world that resembled the ideas I had of them. He said I was also certain of mathematical truths, right?
Yeah.
But
Two
they're
plus
open to doubt.
yeah. 2 + 2 = 4. How is he even sure about that?
There's a deceiving God, Val. You've
There's-
forgotten the deceiving God.
He's deceived me about his existence. I keep forgetting, right?
No, Descartes popped him in. So if you're not happy with the deceiving God, you've got an evil demon there anyway. And so at this point, he's not quite as satisfied with this hypothesis as he used to be. He actually says, on my to-do list, right away, I'm going to need to figure out, because I can't have this deceiving God anymore. I'm going to have to investigate immediately whether or not there is a God.
And this is quite a radical moment, I find. He's calling into doubt the very existence of God. So no wonder, he had to write that kind of gushing letter to the Sorbonne at the beginning of, the Meditations on First Philosophy, where he says, look, I assure you, I'm going to be providing a justification for the existence of God. But for me to be able to do that, I'm going to have to see if I am able to doubt the existence of this God itself, right?
I've got to clear all the rubbish away in my mind, get rid of all the nonsense so that I can establish things properly. That's what he's claiming. And so, he has to apologize to these doctors of the Sorbonne. Yeah. So he's going to classify his thoughts again. He keeps on doing this. He keeps on going back, and he basically tries to tidy up. It's like you've got like this nasty base. How you chuck everything in the basement or in the attic or whatever.
Yeah, and you don't want to know what's in there.
Yeah.
It's the repressed that always returns. You're not sure. It's there, but it's not very clear and distinct what you left down there, how long ago. You probably got your kids' report cards from when they were, 4 years old, 5 years old.
Well, he wants to do a Marie Kondo. He wants to declutter, right? So he's going through this basement, which is his mind, right? And he's going to say, okay, first of all, what do I have in my mind? I've got ideas of things. I've also got, he says, I've got wishes, I've got judgments, and I've got emotions. Yeah. Val.
He says in some of the footnotes, right? Because obviously this text is, as opposed to Discourse on the Method, is written in Latin, right? But in the English edition that we're reading, in a lot of the footnotes, there's additions that happen in French. So exactly as you said, there are emotions like love and hate that he includes in this list of things that he has, in the list of thoughts that he has inside of himself.
So he then says, ideas, he repeats this point. He says, like, I've got an idea of a table. I've got an idea of this row of guitars in front of us in this music studio, right? He says the idea in my mind can't be false, right? Whether or not there are actually guitars out there, that's another question, right?
Yeah, I cannot doubt the fact that I am having this thought. He's not making but he makes an interesting kind of truth claim about this, right? He's like, it is true that I am having this thought, but what is still in question is what relationship this thought has to the referent in the external world, right?
Right, and he's going to say, the problem is when I get judgmental. Don't get judgmental, Val.
We are very quick to judge.
We are. And one thing I'm judging right now is that there are, what are there? There are 6 guitars in front of me, if you can call that thing a guitar, and there's a banjo on the left.
But even then, I feel like your judgment is an error, because what is a guitar without any strings?
That's true. Some of these guitars are just a joke, right? So he says, when we really get things wrong, and he's going to repeat this later on in Meditation 5, when we get things wrong, it's when we're quick to judge. And it's basically when our will, Val, it's Achilles and the tortoise all over again. Yeah. Your will, Val, is Achilles, right? And your understanding is the tortoise, right? Yeah. Now, what does Achilles do? Yeah. He goes faster than the tortoise, doesn't he?
So he thinks.
He outstrips the tortoise.
His will is much stronger than the tortoise's, yeah.
That's right. So he's outstripped the tortoise. He rushes ahead. And that's what we do when we judge.
Too quick to judge. My will has exceeded my understanding.
back in the 1970s. Were
Yeah.
you around the 70s, Val?
I've heard about the 70s quite a bit, but I was not yet in existence. God had not yet caused my existence.
Well, back in Wimbledon, we had a wonderful television show, which I wish the young uns these days had television shows of that quality, because it was a bunch of ex hippies who actually wrote these shows. Right back then, it was
Yeah, right.
after the 60s. Right?
Yeah,
Were you
yeah.
around in the 60s?
Again, another decade that I've heard a lot about. But again, isn't this a moment where all the hippies, the isn't this exactly a moment where the will has overtaken the understanding? The 60s are over. Everyone's seen what a political kind of catastrophe it was. Turns out all you need is love was not the answer. And what happens? They all become corporate shills, right?
No, I have to defend some of them. They came up with some of the best children's culture you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
A shout out to one of my listeners, Ben Tunstall. We've been talking about this, first and oldest friend. We had fabulous children's TV. It was all about sharing. It was all about creativity. And we had Play School. And that was my first example of a clear judgment of existence. Do you know how the Play School song went, Val?
Oh, it's been a long time since I've heard it, and it would be a bit of a difficult one for me to recall in my memory right now.
It starts with, "There's a bear in there."
Yeah.
There's a bear in there.
And there's a chair as well.
That's right. So these are This is when you get things wrong. When you say there's a bear in there, you could well be wrong.
Yeah. I think I was getting confused with perhaps Bananas in Pajamas, but that was maybe more my generation. But yeah, we had Play School.
That was already the age of decadence. By the time you have Bananas in Pajamas, it's all gone pear-shaped.
That's the power of the imagination. There's nothing creative about saying there's a bear in there and there's a chair as well. I'm going to put some bananas in some pajamas. Now that's creative thinking, right?
So let's try and sort. We obviously got to tidy some things up here. So,
We're confused.
yeah, we're going to tidy things up again. So Descartes, because you might think, oh, this Ol and Val, they're getting into a mess, but Descartes, he was getting in a mess all the time as well.
Well, yeah, and this is exactly why he needs to be doing this triage and establishing these criteria of truth and false, because otherwise
He's sorting things out.
yeah, what ideas correspond to true and false, and so yeah, we have this different list of ideas. So we have the innate ideas, as you said already.
And what innate ideas do we have, Val?
We have the innate ideas of geometry, I hope. Algebra?
No, Deceiving God's got you there. You can't have
Deceiving
you can't have your geometrical ideas. I'm not having any straight lines.
They're all so it's no longer 2 and 2 is 4. That's all gone.
That's out the window as well. The innate ideas are you exist.
I'm a thinking thing.
You're a thinking thing.
I'm here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's at least. So I've got one idea.
Yeah, and by the way, listeners, you can try this out at home. You should have, like, if Renee's right, have a check in your mind. You should be able to find the idea of things. What is a thing?
There's some thing that can be referred to in some particular. We don't know what these kind of things are, but we have an idea.
I am a thing that thinks. Therefore, I need to know what things are.
Yeah.
I've got an idea of thinking because I'm saying I'm thinking, right? So I've got those two. I've got and the fancy philosophical word for a thing is substance.
Is
right?
a substance.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because as we recall, Descartes' a bit of a substance dualist. We have two substances. We have the mind, which is this immaterial thing that we are now trying to interrogate, and we have bodies, which are material substances. And if we recall from last week, the material body, the substance that we were interrogating, was a bit of wax, right? There's a thingness to the wax that Descartes was looking at. Even though the form of the body can change shape in all sorts of manners, it can be solid, you can bang it on the table. He's very aggressive with his candles, the old Descartes.
Well, this is precisely why he knows that it's the same wax, because he's got this innate idea of substance. That's the only thing that allows him to say this grey pool, this misshapen blob, is the same thing as that candle earlier on.
So
right?
we have an innate idea of things, but these things, when they take on corporeal or bodily form, they change in quantity, in their size, in their shape, in their qualities. But there is a thingness there. There is a substance that we can think about.
And then we have invented ideas. So we've got innate ideas, Val. Everybody has the same, we hope, if Renee's right. Everybody has the same innate ideas, like they're built into your mind right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And then the next category is invented ideas. Now, these should be specific to each person, right? Have you got any invented ideas in your mind, Val?
I feel like I'm very poor at inventing ideas because they're always something of just a weird mishmash of other ideas that I've encountered in the world, right? So, I mean, I'm not even going to be able to use my own invented idea. I'll steal one from Renee, right? We have a chimera. It's a bit of a mishmash. It's a hodgepodge of different ideas that I have.
Well, I must say that I did have an invented idea in my mind when I was 3 years old. I had an imaginary friend.
You invented? Were you that? Were you that deficient in friends that you had to invent one?
I already had a brother, but it wasn't
Yeah.
enough.
No.
But I actually had, I mean, you might enjoy this from a psychoanalytic point of view, but I had a little chappie in my head who wore a frock coat and a top hat and he had a cane,
Oh,
right?
lovely.
And he was called Mr. Lawless.
Mr. Lawless.
Yeah. And do you know what Mr. Lawless made me do?
He okay. What did Mr. Lawless make you do?
He made me break the law.
Who would have thought? That's very creative. It's a very inventive naming of your imaginary friend. So you invented a friend whose existence is only within your mind, right?
Well, yeah, I knew that I had a brain in my head because I'd heard this, but I misheard it. I thought it was a drain. So I had this kind of like, I imagined this pink kind of oval shaped cave, and there was this rusty drain that went from one ear to the other, right?
Right.
And then poor Mr. Lawless had to duck all the time because he was
Yeah.
ducking underneath the rusty drain.
He didn't want to bang his head on the rusty drain. Well, it's not surprising to me that Descartes is so interested in, I suppose, these invented ideas. Given, maybe if we're to be a little bit, if we give old Rene a bit of a prod, he's got a couple of invented friends of his own, doesn't he?
Oh, yes, he does.
He's been banging on about this evil demon that is allegedly, being the source of all of his misfortunes and doubts. He's got this deceiving genius, evil demon. It depends on how you want to translate it.
For somebody who doubts and wants to doubt away all fictions, he certainly does have quite a few spirits populating his universe.
He leans very heavily on invented ideas. But okay, so we have these different kinds of ideas.
We've got innate ideas, we've got invented ideas, and then Val, we have those little ideas that just come to us from the outside. He calls them adventitious ideas.
Adventitious.
That's right. And these are the ones that he's concerned with. So they're like my ideas of these, I just waltzed my way into this music room, this basement studio down here, and all of a sudden I had the idea of 6 guitars and a banjo.
Yeah.
That's an adventitious idea.
Yeah. And then maybe following that line of thought, you said, maybe I need to get back into playing a little bit of rock and roll.
That's right. Another adventitious idea. So the funny thing about these adventitious ideas, Val, is we have absolutely no choice, right? So I don't have a choice over the innate ideas. I'm human. We've all got the same ones.
Yeah.
That's fine. I don't mind that because everybody's got the same. Yeah. Everybody has to put up with the ideas, the innate ideas. When it comes to invented ideas, I feel like I've got a bit of choice. I can choose to invent an idea or not.
Well, this is where, when he's talking about the list of things that, that the thinking thing can do, you can affirm, you can not affirm, you can will, you can, not will, you can love, you can hate. But, there's all of these things that are happening in your mind. There's a certain freedom that Descartes' going to allow us, right, with our invented ideas. And he says, the fact that we are having them means that they're true, but they just don't have an external referent in the outside world, right? There's a playfulness that Rene is granting us, which I find quite moving.
Yeah, and with all of these stock-taking exercises, whenever he's doing a bit of triage and trying to tidy things up in this basement that is his mind, he always singles something out. And here he said, never mind, let's leave aside the innate ideas for the moment. Yeah. Let's leave aside the invented ideas. Yeah. Let's just concentrate on these adventitious ideas, like the idea I have of these 6 guitars in front of me. And he's going to say, why is it that I think that my idea of the guitars resembles the actual guitars out there in the universe?
Yes, because this is the whole thing that he's been calling into doubt the entire time. He's reinterrogating the relationship between exactly the mind and the body, because if you remember that adventitious ideas, when we think about these ideas being caused from the external world, at the moment, the way that they're being caused or the way that I'm interacting with them is through my sense perception, right? And this is where I can make all of my mistakes. This is where that's where I can get too quick to judge. right? I don't have a clear enough or a distinct enough idea of what my relationship, or what the relationship between my mind and the external world is.
Exactly. And I think this is something that Renee harps on about. It's actually very difficult to maintain this deeply philosophical thought in your mind, which is to actually doubt whether or not the external objects are the same as your ideas of them. This is the moment in The Matrix, the film, right, where Morpheus gets Neo to actually doubt the existence of
Everything.
of everything of the
Yeah.
world that he lives in,
Yeah.
which, as we remember, is Sydney,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So there he's trying to get Neo to doubt the existence of Sydney,
Yep.
right?
Which is not that hard to do.
Well, again, Martin Place,
Yeah.
woman in a red dress goes past, he gets distracted,
Yeah.
right? There's a bit of deja vu. That's a glitch in the Matrix
Yep.
that he points out.
And then he turns around and sees that it's actually an agent. Well, this is, I suppose, using this example, this is the danger of being too quick to judge and being certain about the outside world. You think that a woman in a red dress has walked by you, but then you turn back around and it's actually an agent trying to kill you.
It's Agent Smith.
This is Agent Smith trying to kill you, right? I have to admit, when you first got me to read the poem out at the beginning of this episode, I thought when you said I misheard Key West again, another example of errors in judgment and being too quick. When you said Key West, my mind, we've been talking so much about Sydney, my mind jumped straight to Circular Quay.
This is not a poem about Circular Quay.
No. And there I was laboring under the illusion that, oh, this is interesting. Somebody's actually found something poetical to say about this absolutely just vapid place.
I will not have you besmear Circular Quay. There's some very fine fish and chips and some sizable seagulls there.
Well, I feel like I have to launch this assault on Sydney to make up to repent for past sins. As a somewhat disgruntled viewer, viewer. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what senses are being used because they're all being cast into doubt.
That's right. They're all false.
Yeah. A disgruntled listener wrote to me and said, I wasn't particularly impressed in your lackluster defense of Canberra in the first episode. I believe we talked about this in, and so I'm making up for lost time. But given that we were talking about, I suppose, the architecture we're talking about the city of Sydney, the architecture, the architect. I think you have a little anecdote. I think you have a certain part of responsibility in the design of.
Yes, well, my family does. So my great uncle, Jack Venn, actually was awarded an Order of Australia for his work in town planning.
An Order of Australia?
He was highly disappointed
I
because
bet.
he said if it wasn't a bleeding Labour government he would have got an Order of the British Empire, which is what he wanted.
Oh, so yeah, so I can see now the immigrant 3 times removed story that you were saying at the beginning. You come from the English stock, Queen and country.
That's right. He's of the generation of Australians who still thought that in some strange way Britain was home. And he had certainly served home in the Second World War. But he was a town planner, and he was a great innovator. He invented things back then, Val.
Lots of invented ideas then.
That's right. He was ahead of the pack. He discovered permaculture when it was first invented down in Tasmania. He was right onto it. And he was a great one for curved roads, right? He thought curved roads were great. We need to slow down the drivers.
Yes, exactly. If you have everyone on the straight, again, if you're thinking about we don't want Cartesian drivers, right? Remember Descartes when he says you're lost in the woods, you just stick straight, you go straight ahead as quickly as possible? No.
Well, the Town Planning Authority back in the 50s, the Australian Town Planning Authority, was very Cartesian because basically they had a doctrine which was a frustrated driver is a dangerous driver. And if you put curves, we're not even talking about speed bumps.
We're not talking about Descartes' curves, the most perfect thing in the world. Yeah.
No, we're talking about if you've got a sinuous kind of road, which I must say is the most beautiful kind of road, you're going to frustrate your driver. That's what they used to say. And he went against the grain, Val. He championed curves. And what else did he champion? He said, when do most of the car accidents happen? In Australia. Yeah. And for all of you confused listeners who are actually out there in the States or in Europe, we drive on the left-hand side of the road in Australia.
The correct side.
That's right. And the most car accidents happen when you're turning right
Yeah.
across the flow of traffic, the opposite flow of traffic.
Yes.
So what does a rational town planner do?
Yeah.
He says, let's stop turning right.
Yeah. Exactly. Let's make it all left-hand turns.
That's right. You want to go over there
Yeah.
to the right?
Yeah.
Then you will turn left,
Yeah.
left,
Yeah.
left again,
Yeah.
and cross over.
And then, yeah. So now I'm beginning. Well, I mean, this is, I suppose, a style of town planning that was most dominant, like the idea of having the grids, which I suppose, if you're listening from the US, you're more familiar with, that is prevalent in Sydney and Melbourne. But I can tell you, Brisbane, we did not get that memo. It's just curves absolutely everywhere, apart from one small block in the middle of the city. The rest, there's not a straight line to be seen.
Sounds very organic. Sounds
Yeah.
lovely. Sounds like it needs tidying up.
Hence why there's so much road rage.
That's right.
All right,
So let's get back. Let's get back. We were a bit distracted there by architecture and by town planning. So he's got this question, right? He's saying, let's zero in on these adventitious ideas. Why is it we think that they resemble things out there in the universe?
Yeah.
And at this moment, Val, he has this great discovery.
Yeah.
He says, you know what? There are degrees of being.
There are degrees of... What could he possibly mean by degrees of being?
It means he's got, and this is classic for a philosopher, I can hierarchize. I can rank entities. I can put them in an order from the maximum down to the minimum in terms of how much being they have.
Yeah, and so we already have, I suppose, the most minimal rank of being, if I may put it that way, right? We have the thinking thing, the thinking subject, the cogito, and, you know, going back to these discussions of order, okay, if we have this most minimal substance, we need to start building up. We need to start building from this minimal thing and finding how things are ranked exactly in this hierarchy of being. So we have the minimal one.
So it's very curly though. So let's just set out this hierarchy, right? And it's curly because he's going to do this by talking about ideas and their objective reality. So the objective reality of an idea is its representative reality. It's the size of the thing that it represents, right? So he basically says, my idea of a scratch on this desk, right, has less objective reality than my idea of the entire desk. And my idea of the entire desk has less objective reality than my idea of God, right?
Yep. Okay. So it's ranking. Yeah. So again, we're staying at the level of thought, right? And we're ranking things in their being, the level of ideas. And I suppose a really simple way of putting this as well is
how big
just
are your ideas, Val? How big
how
are
big
your
are
ideas?
they? Right? You know,
Right.
this my idea of this table is smaller than my idea of this room, is smaller than my idea of this building, is smaller than my idea of this university, is smaller than my idea of this city.
Well, if we go by quantity, physical quantity, we're going to get a very, very, very long hierarchy, and it's you're going to have problems with dividing a continuum.
We're going to be going there infinitely, one might argue.
I think he wants a simpler ranking system. I think he basically wants to say, okay, I'm going to have infinite substance. That's my maximum level of objective reality.
Yeah.
That's my biggest idea.
Yep.
Is the infinite substance that is God.
Infinity, right?
Right.
Yeah, it can't get bigger than infinity, to
That's
my
my
knowledge.
biggest idea. My next biggest idea is all finite substances. Doesn't matter whether it's a container ship, your dog, my bedroom, this blanket, that carrot, whatever. They're all finite substances. Next level down are going to be, I reckon, essential properties, right?
Essential properties, so things like color or...
No, that's not essential. That's like this table, it could be blue or purple.
So that's not... So even more essential property would be its form then. The formness of the table?
A table has to be flat.
It has to be flat.
Right? It has to have legs or something holding it up.
Yeah.
Right? It can't be, it has to be more or less waist level. It can't be
Yeah.
down near my ankles or up near my head. Then it's not a very good table.
But a table, but is it a question of functionality, right? How well does it function as a table? I feel like we're getting into...
We can go deep into the woods, as philosophers always
Yeah.
do. But anyway, let's just assume there are essential properties
Yes.
of finite substances. That's your like level 3 or whatever.
Yep.
Level 1 was God. And
Yeah.
then we've got accidental properties, which
Yes.
are like little scuffs, little scratches,
Yeah.
marks on the table. Somebody wrote, I was here
Yeah.
1995 or something on the
Yeah.
table, that kind of. They're accidental properties,
Yeah.
right? And they have the lowest level
Yeah.
of being, right? Because they couldn't even exist if
Yeah.
it wasn't for the prior existence
Yeah.
of the table.
There are contingent occurrences that happen to the object in its existence, right? Okay, so we have a pretty simple, well, I think, ranking system, I suppose, between the different degrees of being. You know, we have a maximality, we have a minimality.
Yeah, we've got a wonderful range, and he's now ordered. He's properly tidied things up in the basement
Yep.
that is his mind, right? He's got this ranking system, and then this is another tricky part, right? And remember, we're setting up his famous proof for the existence of God, the first
Yes.
proof, right?
Yep.
We're not there yet, and we probably won't get there this episode, Val. I'm sorry to say.
No, it's okay. We all suffer from our finitude.
Yeah, we just have to set things up first. So, next step is the doctrine of causation.
Oh, okay. So this is going to be a very interesting doctrine. But I should just say also, since it's been a topic that we've been discussing again and again, you know, how rigorous is Descartes in applying his own method that he discusses in Discourse on the Method in this book, Meditations on First Philosophy? What you've just outlined there, Ol, well, and what Descartes is saying, I feel like this is a very clear demonstration of all of the steps that he outlines in terms of, you know, its order, you know, in what size things are, etc. I feel like this part here is a very strong demonstration of his method.
Well, Val, he's got a problem. It's what the design theorists like to call a wicked problem,
Yeah.
right? Why is it, how is it that my ideas actually resemble the things out there in the world? And he's breaking it down into its tiny bits.
Yeah, the smallest possible thing in hopes of being able to reconstruct the universe, right?
Right. And now he's actually he's going to develop a doctrine of causation,
Okay.
right? Which is basically means he's going to talk about causes and effects and the relationship between them. And he's doing that as a kind of application of this hierarchy of degrees of being.
Yeah.
So this sounds all very complicated, but I think everybody that's listening to us, Val, has heard the saying, something cannot come from nothing.
I feel like that just seems like an innate truth, surely.
What about the Big Bang, Val? What about the Big Bang?
Well, isn't that the question on everyone's lips, right? What happens before the Big Bang? Is the Big Bang self-causing? You know, if we want to be Spinozists about it later, then yeah, sure, the Big Bang is self-causing, but there's a problem of causality, right? The Big Bang. Well, we can get into this, but
Descartes' going to avoid the Big Bang because he's going to have an eternal
No.
God sooner or later. But
Yeah.
first of all, everybody's So let's just give them this for the moment. Like something cannot arise from nothing. The next thing he says is everybody accepts that if you've got an oak tree, right, it must have come from an acorn.
stands to reason, right? The acorn could not have, an oak tree could not have occurred in another fashion, right?
Exactly.
There's
So
a necessity. There's a necessity between this relationship, right?
what's an acorn? In his classification system, it's a finite substance.
Yeah.
What's an oak tree? It's a finite substance.
Of a slightly different size, but it's still a finite substance, right?
Right, it grows.
Yeah.
So there we have a finite substance can cause another finite substance. And then finally, let's talk about miracles, Val. Let's talk about the Immaculate Conception.
Okay. I believe in miracles.
Well, there you go.
And where are you from?
That means an infinite substance,
Yeah.
right, on a Tuesday can suddenly say, I know what, I'm
Yeah.
going to help some water be turned into wine.
Yeah.
I'm going to multiply some loaf of bread into 5,000 loaves of breads,
Yeah.
right?
I'm going to go for a walk on some water.
So
I'm not rowing on the Seine. I don't need a dinghy. I don't need any permits from the Mary. I'm just going to walk straight across it, right?
that's right. So in these cases, Val, we've got an infinite substance, God, causing something to happen at the level of finite substance.
Yeah, because anything is possible in infinity, right? Miracles can happen when you have infinity as your maximal unit.
But we've got these three things that can happen, right? Something can't arise from nothing. Acorn can cause an oak tree. God can bring about miracles amongst finite substances. But, and this is the stickler, this is the rule, what is more perfect cannot arise from something that is less perfect.
Okay. So what is more perfect cannot arise from something that is less perfect.
So basically, he's saying, Ludwig Feuerbach, you bastards,
Yeah.
you know, you're writing, what is it, 200 years after me.
Yeah.
You try to claim that God didn't create man in his image, but man created God in his image.
An outrageous claim, and that would create a huge amount of fuss amongst the young Hegelians, of which, a certain young Mr. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, along with some other comical kind of characters like Max Stirner. They'd make a big ado about this idea that man creates God, but Descartes here is doing the exact opposite.
He's basically ruling out all of these atheist arguments
Yeah.
from the outset by saying a finite substance, which is less perfect,
Yeah.
cannot create, cannot cause
And-
an infinite
An
substance.
infinite substance. So he's not making the claim that a finite substance cannot get better than itself in relation to other things. He's saying finitude cannot cause infinity. Only infinity can cause finite things.
And I think to bring this down to an everyday level, at the level of eugenics and at a level of parenting and reproduction of the species, that kind of thing, we can translate this dictum: what is more perfect cannot arise from what is less perfect. So what that means, right, is that genius parents can have genius children or utterly degenerate children,
because
right?
because they are the standard, and it can only get lesser or equal,
Yeah.
right?
But if you've got something less perfect, if you've got utterly degenerate parents, and
Yeah.
I must say, Val, there are some utterly degenerate parents out there,
I have heard.
they cannot have genius children.
This is something that I can see why you said eugenics at the beginning. This is a bit of a eugenicist argument in some respects, right?
Well, it's funny that you should mention this because a lot of people think that Plato is like at the origin. There was a terrible book written by Karl Popper last
Yes.
century
Yeah.
that claimed that Plato in some way like misunderstood is the origin of totalitarianism. And they claim to read eugenics. They can find eugenics in Book 5 of the Republic,
Yes.
right, where there's a very strange extended family kind of arrangement, which I must say in Plato's defense, it's the first time you've had a childcare system out there for the women, so the women can actually go out and be guardians, right? Somebody's got to take care of the children.
There are certain advantages to collectivizing, the family unit outside of the nuclear family kind of binary that we
all
have.
collectivise. We've got babysitters, we've got aunts, we've got the neighbours who help out everywhere. You naturally collectivise.
Yes,
fine,
but
right?
but this is in Plato's defense. This is a public collectivization. When we talk about childcare today in our modern world, a lot of it's privatized. So there's another division that's going on there.
Absolutely, a lot of danger with privatising essential services. But here, what I'm trying to say is that Plato, at least, said that you can have lesser parents who can have brilliant children.
Yeah.
Because he says, I mean, remember, there are three types of soul in the Republic. You've got golden souls, right? It's like that Micah song, right? You've got silver souls and you've got bronze souls.
Yeah.
Right? And he says it is the case that if two silver parents get together, or even a bronze parent and a silver parent, they might have a golden child.
Yeah, and so they're not strictly delineated in that in a strictly kind of eugenicist way, I suppose. And I mean, the other thing that this all depends on how you want to read Plato, but given his emphasis on education, there is a way in which anyone can participate in the education of becoming a philosopher, right? It just needs to be a very kind of strict, disciplined one. But theoretically, I know he says, they have to start this education from childhood, but he never really says that they have to come from a social class.
No, we can definitely find egalitarianism in Plato, just as in Descartes. But Descartes' not having any of this, Val. He's saying, I've doubted away the whole philosophical tradition. How dare you bring up Plato? You've got it all wrong. Your example's just silly. Parents, children, they're all just finite substances. What I'm basically saying is you can't have a cause that is a finite substance that produces as its effect an infinite substance. That's not on.
That's okay.
It's not going to work in his universe.
That's okay.
Right? So we have to accept, let's just say, like, for the sake of it, we're going to accept this doctrine of causality, right?
We'll have to accept it if we're going to follow the meditation to its end.
And then here's the tricky bit, Val. Here's the tricky bit.
It hasn't been tricky enough already.
Oh no, he pulls a fast one here. He applies this doctrine of causation to those adventitious ideas.
Oh, this is very sneaky.
So
Right?
he's asking the question, where do these adventitious ideas come from? What is the source?
Yeah.
What is the origin of these ideas?
Yeah. Because I still can't. Yeah, I still can't rely on just my immediate relationship between my ideas and the outside world. There must, because the outside world, it's also comprised of finite substances. They're not the most perfect thing. There's got to be some other kind of cause for all of this, right?
Well, isn't it kind of trippy, Val, just sitting here to actually look at this wall of guitars and to think, oh my God, the ideas of the guitars that I have is the effect of a cause. I've only got access to the effect,
Yeah.
right? Somewhere out there is a cause.
There has to be a different cause. It doesn't matter how much you imagine and invent things in your ideas, you still need to have this relationship to an external form of causality. And I really think that I'm gonna be jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'm not gonna give any spoilers. He's really setting the ground for the problematic that he's going to be trying to answer in Meditation 6, right? This idea of what is the causal relationship between my ideas and the external world, right? He says that there's something about the external world that is impressing itself upon us, but at this stage in the meditation, it can't just be these finite, imperfect, or maybe imperfect is a bit of a harsh word, but the world can't just be a collection of finite things that are impressing themselves upon me. There has to be something beyond that, something perfect.
Well, precisely. So here's how he applies this doctrine of causation, right? So he says, this idea I have of heat or of a stone cannot exist in me unless it is put there by some cause which contains at least as much reality as I conceive to be in the heat or in the stone, right? Now, this is where he gets a little bit technical, and I have to say it is the most technical terminological point in the meditations.
Oh, absolutely. It is. He covers so much ground in such a short amount of time.
So he's going to make a distinction, Val, in between formal reality and objective reality.
Oh, this is where his philosophy is really, him as a philosopher is in full flight. The difference between formal reality and objective reality.
Sneak this one into a dinner table conversation next time you can.
No wonder you had to invent some friends. I don't think that's a very popular...
Well, you can say, look, at the level of formal reality, you have a stone on the beach. It's been formed by erosion.
Yeah.
The waves have been crashing in. It's sandstone. It's in Sydney. There's a boulder that's tumbled down from a cliff, right?
Yeah.
So it's a whole series of mechanical causes and effects.
Yeah. It has a causal history that led it up to this point.
That's the formal reality out there, right? And then there is my memory of that particular sandstone cliff and of those boulders. I'm going to go for, what is it, Fisherman's Cove, just up from Coogee.
Yeah.
Down from Bronte, down from Tamarama,
Yeah.
right? There's a whole bunch of orange boulders there. You can leap off into the sea from them.
Yeah.
And watch out for the sharks, though.
Yeah.
Especially if if they haven't had a good meal recently.
Yeah.
And I have the idea of those orange boulders in my mind, right?
Yeah.
And so that idea has the objective reality of an idea of a finite substance, the boulder,
Right.
And he's saying, the boulder itself out there has to have the same degree of formal reality as my idea has, right?
So it has the same degree of reality as your formal ideas of it. Could we relate this in the same way? He's doing the same thing as we discussed with the wax example, right? We have a formal idea of the piece of wax, right? Then we can tell the causal history of the wax changing shape. We've wanted to, given that it was just Valentine's Day, we wanted to have a romantic night in. We lit the candle. We can tell this kind of causal history about the candle, right? But we still have this formal idea. If I'm understanding this correctly, that there is a finite substance that is this bit of wax.
Well,
Yeah.
let me try and tidy things up
Yep.
for you, Val. Basically, everything in the universe has formal being, right? So ideas also have formal being, right? Because they come in chains. He's perfectly happy to say some of my ideas, like ideas that I invent, are built out of other ideas. So we've got cause and effect happening in our ideas, right? But there's a big difference in between my idea of the boulder at Fisherman's Cove, right, and the actual boulder, right? Because my
Yeah.
idea of the boulder represents something outside it. That's the strange
Yep.
thing about ideas is
Yep.
they refer to another
Yeah.
register of reality.
Yeah.
Whereas the boulder itself, as far as I
Yeah.
know, unless we're some kind of like,
Yeah.
pantheist or whatever,
Yeah.
the boulder itself hasn't got the foggiest about anything else outside
No.
it. It doesn't care about representing anything else.
No.
It's just a boulder. It's
It's
happy being a boulder.
It's not. It's not a thinking. The boulder does not reflect. I mean, this. I feel like this is a point that Hegel takes up later on, at least at the beginning of his introductory lectures on aesthetics, where he makes this distinction in a very Cartesian way between the human mind and nature, and he says, at least at the beginning, he'll try and reconcile this initial separation in his usual dialectical fashion. But he says the human mind is higher than than nature on this scale of being because the mind is reflective and representational. Nature doesn't think, at least for Hegel, right? So in the same way, Descartes is doing a similar thing. The boulder is just out there doing its own thing. It doesn't have this. It doesn't have thoughts of us in the same way that we have thoughts of the boulder.
Absolutely. So we have certain things in the universe which have got formal reality, right? Like boulders, like guitars. And then there are other things in the universe that have both formal reality and objective reality because they represent things outside them, right? Like ideas.
Ah, yep. Okay, so we're still at this. Yep. Okay. So this distinction is starting to make more sense to me.
Right. So I'm going to read out the conclusion to this argument when he applies this doctrine of causation to his hierarchy of degrees of being, right? And we're going to go back over this, but let's try it a first time. The first time round, he says, in order for a given idea to contain such and such objective, what is such and such, Val? What is such and such?
So on and so on.
What?
This and that.
Only a philosopher would say
Yeah.
such and such.
Well, he's still confused. He's still not. He's. I feel like he's still not entirely sure what he's talking about. So you go this and that, such and such.
I have to a shout out to my former flatmate Kate, who used to take the piss no end of my other flatmate Andrew Lewis, who was a philosopher back then. She used to call him Mr. Such and Such.
Oh, there you go.
He was always saying such and such.
Yeah. Well, we
Now-
have the modern sort of Zizek and so on and so on and such and such. You know, it's things, bits and bobs.
Sounds like a law firm in the city. That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this again. In order for a given idea, right, to contain such and such objective reality, it must surely derive it from some cause which contains at least as much formal reality as there is objective reality in the idea. Is that clear and distinct, Val?
I feel like this is more of a tongue twister than the poem that I read out at the beginning of this episode.
No. Let's say,
Yeah.
well, basically, he's saying like, my idea of the guitar, right, has a certain rank of objective reality because it's an idea of a finite substance.
Yep.
It's not the idea of a scratch on that guitar.
No.
It's not the idea of missing strings on that guitar.
Guitar.
Right?
It is the idea of that guitar.
Of the whole guitar.
Of in its totality as a finite substance, my idea of the finite substance.
Right.
My idea of the guitar.
And he's saying you cannot get an idea of a whole guitar from some external cause that is just some accidental scratch on the guitar.
No. That's
He says you can't just have a missing string and then think of a whole guitar,
no.
right? So you have to have as much formal reality out there in the universe. There has to be a whole guitar.
Yeah.
For me, actually, to have an idea of a whole guitar at the level of objective reality of the idea.
in order to recognize that something is missing from a finite substance, you need to have the idea of the whole of the finite substance, right? For me, if I had never come across, if the form of the guitar was such that it didn't have any strings, that would be a mistaken kind of idea about it, right? But I wouldn't know that because I had lost something about the whole of the guitar, right? The whole form of the guitar means that it needs these strings as well, right?
Absolutely. And you can't, I mean, basically, this is an amazing argument because basically he's saying that at the level of my ideas with this doctrine, I can deduce something about what is out there in the universe causing my ideas.
Yeah.
I don't yet know whether it's the same shape, whether it
Yeah.
looks like my ideas, but what I do know is that what is out there in the universe affecting my mind,
Yeah.
it's got to have the same degree of reality as my ideas of it.
Yeah.
Right? So it could be a pink elephant out there
Yeah.
causing my idea of a guitar,
Yeah.
but at least the pink elephant, Val, is a
Yes.
finite substance.
Yes.
Right?
At least it's giving me an idea of something. There is something out there that is giving me these ideas.
Let's say the pink elephant burps,
Yeah.
Val, a belch, right?
Yeah.
Now that is an accidental property, if I've ever heard of one,
Yeah.
of a pink elephant,
Yes.
right? And so I've got my burping elephant, right? But the burp in itself, because it's contingent, because it vanishes, because it's
Yeah.
ephemeral,
Yes.
right? That burp cannot produce in me the idea of a finite substance.
Ah, I see. Well, I'm glad you're talking about pink elephants, Ol, because I thought I was the only one, and I didn't want to mention it.
But back then, again, I have to go back in time. I'm not sure. Were you around in the 50s, Val?
Just as I was not around in the 70s nor the 60s, I was also not around in the 50s.
There you go with your cause and effect arguments
Yeah.
again. There's always hope. But anyway, I'm pretty sure it was the 50s. If not, it was the 40s. There was a Walt Disney film called Dumbo, right?
Yes.
And when I'm referring to pink elephants, there is indeed never mind the 1960s, there is a very trippy sequence in there with dancing pink elephants. Let me just say.
I do recall.
Yeah, don't know what we show our
Yeah.
children sometimes.
No. All sorts of things that are invented in the imaginary.
Right. Now, here's the kicker, right? So he's got his thesis, right, which is that basically I can deduce from the level of objective reality of my ideas, I can say something out there has the same degree of formal reality. Now, here's the kicker, right? He says, for if we suppose that an idea contains something which was not in its cause, it must have got this from nothing. Yet the mode of being by which a thing exists objectively or representatively in the intellect by way of an idea, imperfect though it may be, is certainly not nothing. And so it cannot come from nothing, right?
Yeah.
So my idea of a full guitar,
Yeah.
right, it can't come from nothing, right?
Yeah.
Because my idea of a scratch on that guitar can come from a scratch out there in the universe.
A
on the
contingent
guitar.
a contingent occurrence, yeah.
Yeah. But the rest of my idea of the whole of the guitar,
Yeah.
right? If its cause was supposedly just a scratch, then it would have come from nothing. But you can't have things coming from nothing, Val.
No, because maybe this is a question I think we're going to come back to, but so nothing doesn't exist on the degrees when Descartes' talking about the degrees of existence or the degrees of being, nothing cannot exist, right?
Nothing cannot exist.
Nothing cannot. Well, maybe I used a double negative there.
So you can have your nothings, right?
Yeah.
But all they're going to produce are ideas of nothing, as far as he's concerned.
So nothing can cause nothing. Nothing comes from nothing.
If you've got a void in your head, Val,
Yeah.
right? This happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
That's caused by nothingness.
I've spent too many years reading about the void.
So now, if you listeners are having a little bit of trouble, and I must say this is certainly a point that gives me trouble and has given many of my students trouble over the years, I invite you to refer to the actual text. And here I think, Val, we should acknowledge merit where merit is due. This is a very fine, well, I mean, it's controversial as any translation, but I must say that John Cottingham, Robert Stutoff, and Dugald Murdoch did a fine job here.
Yeah, absolutely lovely translation, and I'm glad that you corrected one of my confusions about this translation, because as I was reading along, there's a whole bunch of footnotes that refer to, things that were written in the French version, and me and I suppose my essential French nature was outraged. I said, well, if this is there in the French version, why aren't the translators just putting it into the actual text? Why are they footnoting the great and noble French language? And you very kindly reminded me, you absolute drongo, this text was written in Latin first. They're translating from Latin and then very kindly also referring to the French translation,
The original French
the
translation.
original French translation.
Back in the day. So, just a quick declaration about conflict of interest. Neither me nor Val are actually owners of Cambridge University Press,
No,
nor are we employees of Cambridge
Yeah.
University Press.
not to your knowledge.
No, but I would like to acknowledge that we're working with a pretty good edition, and this is actually Dr. Stephen Gaukroger, Professor Stephen Gaukroger. This is the edition that he recommended for me. He was, I have to say, one of my best philosophy lecturers ever. I took more notes in his lectures than I've ever taken in a lecture.
Oh, fantastic.
And this was the edition that he recommended, the Selected Philosophical Writings of Descartes,
Yeah.
Cambridge University Press. If you want to sponsor us, Cambridge, you're welcome.
Yeah.
They're welcome.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, we're always accepting sponsorships.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. I'm still waiting for my Orangina sponsorship.
You better start plugging that product then.
But, so I suppose we're on the precipice of something, Ol.
We are.
We're
We're
on
just we're just about there.
There's something about objective reality that is out there. We have something in our ideas. There's some kind of causal relationship to objective reality, but Descartes' not going to be happy with just objective reality as a series of finite substances, right? There has to be something.
He wants more, Val. He wants more. He wants the infinite.
What more could? Well, I suppose that's going to be the question that we're going
What
to.
more could a Frenchman want?
What more could? Nothing but the world.
That's right. Or even more than the
Well,
world.
not even the whole universe.
So basically, what he's looking for is he's looking for the greatest amount of objective reality in his ideas.
Yeah. What could possibly be in possession of the most amount of
He's
objective
looking for the
reality?
maximum idea.
The maximum size.
Right. And many of you may think, oh, I'm not a believer. This is all rubbish. But let me point out to you, and this is a point that another Frenchman made, Tristan Garcia, you cannot avoid having a maximum idea.
It is a problem that returns again and again and again whenever you have to try and explain the finitude of the world. At some point, you need a maximum point to be able to refer back to finite things, right?
You need some kind of ultimate container.
Yeah. We all suffer from our finitude, Ol, and when we suffer the most, that's when we look to infinity.
That's right. But then we can get caught up in an infinite procedure of truth, as Badger tells us.
Yes, as Alain.
So let's say you're there, you're in your finite situation. He's going to say, you can think of a multiverse, you can think of the cosmos, you can think of the universe, but in the end, it's all the same thing. There is one maximum idea in your mind, right, that has the greatest level of objective reality. So this is it. This is you ready for the conclusion, Val?
I've never been more ready.
If the objective reality, this is Rene speaking, it's not me.
Okay.
Right. If the objective reality of any of my ideas turns out to be so great that I am sure the same reality does not reside in me, either formally or eminently, and hence that I myself cannot be its cause, it will necessarily follow that I am not alone in this world, but that some other thing, which is the cause of this idea, also exists. How about that?
I'm not alone in this world. What a beautiful way to get out of, the accusations of solipsism. I am not the only thing that exists, right?
He's gonna build out his universe, Val.
There's something else out there that is causing all of this.
He's got a friend.
He's got a friend, and not just an imaginary one.
Oh no, he's got a very big friend.
He's deduced the existence of his friend from the most minimal to the most maximal.
Exactly. All he had was an idea in his head, but it was the greatest possible idea.
Yes. The greatest possible idea that one can have.
So he's pulled. I'd like to say he's pulled a rabbit out of his hat, but it's about a bit bigger than a rabbit. No,
It's a little bit higher up on the degree of being.
but we don't quite know what this enormous rabbit is. I
No,
think we're going to have to leave that, Val, for the next
I
episode.
think we'll have to find out about that exactly next week.
So we're looking forward to having you listen to us.
Yeah.
What a ridiculous phrase! In episode 5.
Yeah, thanks again for bearing with us, for I suppose joining us on this road trip, on this journey through Descartes' philosophy, where we go, I suppose, very much point by point. But as any of you, if you've tried to read the text, there are a lot of very complicated and hairy moments that invite many questions. But Descartes, he's leading us somewhere, right?
Oh, we're definitely going somewhere here.
We're going somewhere.
And if any of you do feel like writing to us, we do actually have a Gmail address now. So it is Lunar Philosophy Trip, all lowercase letters, at gmail.com. Lunar Philosophy Trip at gmail.com.
We always invite feedback, comments, and yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly about where to go to from here.
See you next time.
See ya.